Today on the show, we give it up to the Pokemon that wouldn't be here without us. Arceus be damned.
Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and universes of our favorite video games. I'm Caleb.
I'm Bruce, and we have a special guest with us here today at our Pokemon Lore Party episode, Lucas from POKEScience.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Yeah. I'm good. I'm excited. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love this sort of stuff. I love coming in and talking about one of the only two things I could say I know a lot about.
Yeah, I looked at you guys and I was just like trying to figure out, we could be able to find someone, and I found top Pokemon podcasts, and you guys really know your stuff. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Wait, no, the story you told me is that we left the door open and they just wandered in.
Whoa. I will have you know, we do not wander in, sir. We break in violently and take the spotlight. That's how we roll. Two of us are Floridian.
Oh, we got some Florida boys.
Fair enough. But speaking of things that have a tendency to break in and take the spotlight, today we're talking about the relationship between humans and Pokemon, specifically the more indirect elements of it.
Yeah, we talked about Pokemon being created by humanity before by more deliberate means, i.e. like Porygon or Mewtwo, whether it be mad scientists or what have you. But this time, I kind of wanted to see if we could talk about just Pokemon that we did create or at least influence, but not really by our own decision-making or planning. It just kind of happened.
There are quite a few, there like you guys said, there are quite a few Pokemon that were made by people. Sometimes there are Pokemon like Golurk who were made in ancient times and just stick around, and others, like you said, there's just some genetic abominations. Also, shout out to Genesect as one of those genetic abominations. I know Mewtwo gets the spotlight a lot, but that horrifying Terminator bug, I feel, deserves a little bit more love.
Yeah, I mean, especially for what it's been put through.
Oh my goodness, yes. No, hey, I've been brought back to life. Am I going to go on an adventure with a 10-year-old? No.
Yeah, we're going to break it down kind of between indirect activity like pollution, urbanization, then direct kind of human intervention that didn't expect something to happen, like relocation. And then we'll talk about, just maybe kind of legends and stuff that kind of is
ghosts.
Pretty much ghosts. We're going to be talking about ghosts. It's in the Pokedex, but you don't know if it's real or not.
Yeah, every time we do an episode of POKEScience, we're like, okay, how do we explain the ghosts? How do we science this? How do we science the undead?
That definitely does segue us a little bit nicely into, I guess, the next shout out part of this.
Absolutely.
Which, happy to have you here, talking about, all the, different ways you guys struggle to figure out how to address ghosts. So, what is it you guys talk about?
Yeah, tell us about POKEScience.
So, for over 4 years now, me and some friends of mine, Madison, Chris, and Don, we've worked together to try and take the science from the Pokemon games and try and connect it to real life. It didn't always start that way. It was me and my friend Matt at the time, and then things changed and adapted and grew. It basically started with me trying to think of ways to try and express my love of science. I always found that Pokemon was what got me into nature, what got me into sciences, and when I got into the science fields, that was very different from everybody else. Everyone else I was born and raised with the woods and the creatures, or I was raised on a boat with dolphins. And it's interesting that these games have produced so much real-world science into them, and yet most people take it for granted. And they put a lot of work into these games to connect them to real-world cultures and ideas, and we want to try and express that. We want to try and talk about it. And over time, we've talked about so many different topics. We've talked about different cultures that have been put into the game, the different animals, the different plants. We've even got the chance to interview people who are volcanologists. We've talked to people who work for the National Weather Service. We've talked to multiple PhD students and scientists about their topic to try and get them to give us their thoughts on this and give us a real world context. My goal and our goal together is to try and get people to appreciate the world around us a little bit more through these games. If someone looks at an animal differently after seeing a Pokemon, then we did our, I don't want to call it a job, our hobby. We did our hobby correctly.
Wow, that is a very fascinating way to explain that. I love that. And you said everyone on the show has some sort of like scientific background.
Not always like the hard sciences. Like we do have Madison, who's a great with social scientists and cultures. She loves looking up things like yokai and things like that, the Japanese mythology. She's really good at it. Don being just a man who's worked a lot of his life in wildlife management. He's worked outdoors. He loves hunting and fishing a lot. So he brings in expertise that most scientists don't normally bring in, because I'll be honest, most scientists I've met aren't hunters. They're nerds. But Don is both, and it's really cool to have him. Chris handles a lot of our editing stuff these days. He's great with video and audio, but he also works closer to agriculture. So he knows a lot of people who can help with everything from farming and plant life. And he's also a whiz when it comes to history. We didn't know this when we had him on. He just has a lot of random history on him, and it's really, really useful.
Oh, dude, I love history, so we will get along great.
And I'm just the animal bio guy. I got my degree in integrated animal biology from the University of South Florida. Worked at zoos and aquariums. Currently, I'm teaching in Japan, but I'll be ending that teaching period in March, and I'll be back to working at aquariums again sometime around April.
So you were highly qualified for this.
I mean, I wouldn't know. We've interviewed some highly qualified people. When you meet and work with someone who's a master's degree paleontologist who has their own podcast, it's like, we're just our little Pokemon buddies. We try and focus more on just trying to get as many people to listen to us, not so much for like fame and glory, but just because we want people to appreciate the science that's put into this game. We all love these games, and we all want people to appreciate just how much work and time went into actually getting all this stuff. And like I said before, nature has some pretty cool stuff in it. And it's always very fun to see when Pokemon has like done worse. Like the Pokemon equivalent has done worse than the real world equivalent. I love that. It's the best.
Oh yeah.
So if people want to check you guys out, if they're like halfway into this podcast and they decide they'd rather be listening to that, with the fear of giving them ideas,
what would they like to listen? Where can they find you after they finish this episode?
Yes, afterwards. Not dipping right here at the 7-8 minute mark. Yes. We are PokeScience on Twitter. We are at Pokemon Science. You can find us there. We are on every major podcast platform, so you can just type in PokeScience and you will typically find us pretty darn quickly. Like you guys said, we do have. We're not like the top, like, oh my gosh, they are the Pokemon content podcast, and we're fine with that. But we really appreciate that so many people have liked us and followed us that we are somewhere in, like, whenever someone puts up a Pokemon podcast, we're somewhere in the 10. And that feels good. When you start, you don't know how good it's going to be. And then when you're like in a niche community, and then even more niche with talking about sciences instead of like the battle mechanics or any of that, it's really nice. We cannot thank our listeners enough for coming and listening. We hope that after you guys are done listening to me, Gab, you guys will you'll come over, check some of our weird stuff out.
I mean, with that, we love hearing from our listeners too. So if you have any other thoughts on the science or lore or just general Pokemon things we're talking about today, you can always email us at lorepartypodcast@gmail.com. And we also stream weekly on Twitch now. So be sure to follow us at twitch.tv/lore_party.
Awesome. So first, let's just kind of talk about why we even want to talk about this in the first place. And it really comes to kind of that saying of, if you really want to see someone's intentions, don't listen to them, watch their actions. That kind of came from me kind of putting this research and script together about Pokemon influenced by humanity, and just wanting to know, like, okay, there's Mewtwo and Genesect and Porygon where we're like actually putting an effort into creating Pokemon, but what are the Pokemon that we have created accidentally, just by our activity, by our intentions, and seeing how that kind of reflects in what humanity's like true essence is. And, the answer may surprise you whether or not you have a specific opinion on humanity, especially in the Pokemon universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, humanity and Pokemon's relationship status on Facebook it's complicated.
I mean, I think when it comes to my favorite, it's complicated when it comes to Pokemon, comes from one of the Pokemon movies, the one with Lucario, where literally the first 2 minutes or 3 minutes of it is just literally a war. Like
a
literally,
war, like a huge medieval war, armored Tyranitar,
and like Houndoom's
crazy.
hunting down his scouts. It's like, where's that game? I love Legends, but where's that game?
It's gotta come.
I want to fight him. Oh no, you knocked out the. No, they ain't fainted. They dead. No mercy from the Lucas Empire. Expansionism.
Like with all of that civilization and I guess all of that war and all of that. Because what is it? The one way or another, the Pokemon world has humans in it, but it also has a lot of humans in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with that segues into we have Pokemon that would never have even existed without the thing that humanity always keeps creating, and that's waste.
Good old pollution.
The gooey, the goopy stuff.
Exactly. It's been with us every single iteration and from the first generation. And I mean, it's been with actual humanity. We create waste, industrial waste, regular waste, the goopy stuff, as you said.
It is also fascinating from historical sense. A lot of people think like, oh, pollution started in the 1800s with the Industrial Revolution. Nah, pollution has been a thing since humanity was in groups. Like one of the greatest ways of looking up Native American cultures and native cultures around the world is finding their piles of trash. Like they literally just made piles of trash and they got buried over time. Now, obviously, broken spearheads and clamshells is not the same as burying radioactive waste, but it's so interesting that pollution and throwing away our crap is kind of just as human as, eating and sleeping. It's really cool.
It is. Like, I mean, either way, I feel like something would come out of that in the Pokemon universe, such as Grimer and Muck.
But yeah, they're literal like globs of toxic waste, and if they're, to whatever degree their Pokedex entries are assumed to be literal, they feed almost exclusively on human waste. So especially things like industrial waste from factories.
Also, in my research, I found multiple Pokedex entries. It's both kind of an either or and both kind of thing. First, it says about their like origin is that the sludge from like a factory was transformed when exposed to X-rays from the moon. But then it also says that they emerged from the sludge that just settled on a polluted seabed and like a chemical reaction animated it into life. But then there's another Pokedex entry that kind of combines them. It says, quote, "It was born when sludge in a dirty stream was exposed to the moon's X-rays," which sounds incredibly like pulp fiction, comic book era, crazy gamma radiation origins.
Okay, but now I want to know what the Pokemon on the moon are doing that there's X-rays.
Oh, that would be the Clefables and the Clefairies. They're up to something. They're always up to something. Like, again, it's such a weird thing, and you're right. It stems from the old pulp fiction days of like when monsters could be made by just a simple thing and radiation thrown at it. But I think it is, it's fun. It's fun to think that they had this little pulp fiction-y idea. And again, this was a Generation 1 Pokemon. Their Pokedex entries are vast and weird. You tend to just
very weird.
Ignore some of the weird stuff and focus on the good stuff, like the produced from a polluted seabed. Let's focus on that. Forget the X-rays. Stop thinking about it. Stop thinking about it.
Yeah, there was just something down at the sea floor that
under
really,
the sea,
did that.
Oh God, Grimer.
But I mean, whatever it was that happened, though, it's happened a few times. Because then on top of that, we also have Trubbish and
Garbodor.
Garbodor.
Yeah, I was never sure what the accented syllable on that
Oh no,
one
you're
is.
fine. Like these are literal, like a talking, walking trash bag with eyes, and then a mini landfill that is its own organism. That were in the Unova region, I believe. And like literally is just the other counterpart to Grimer and Muck. Instead of it being just a bunch of goo, it's just all the crap we throw away. Like you said, like the other kind of waste that humans produce.
I kind of want to see what an ancient version of these would look like. Like if you
Oh,
found a
shit.
native,
Broken arrowheads and like
just
leather
saying,
straps.
like, hi. Yeah, no, y'all thought it was just you who was dirty. Nah, your ancestors were dirty too, and they're just literally crawling around. It's like it's not even poisonous because there's no real harm or waste in it. It's just like a rock type. It's like just solidified over time. It's got fossils and stuff thrown inside of it.
It's got to be sharper.
Oh yeah, no, I would give it something like Iron Barb as an ability, just where you touch it and you get cut up by it. Like it's just broken pieces of sharp objects, and I think that would be really cool.
I don't know, but like, I mean, one way or another, whatever the story with it is, it establishes this idea that creating Pokemon isn't a thing that humans are just doing when we're intentionally seeking it out to do it. Because like, we've talked in the past about, and the games have outright addressed the consequences and ethics of humans outright creating artificial Pokemon. But these kind of accidental Pokemon are this other thing that is clearly shown to establish in the universe and is fascinating, but we don't see as much direct conversation on it.
Yeah, I mean, like, even the fact that this is happening through pollution, like, is there a Pokemon EPA that goes out and says, hey, what is all this chemicals? There is something that literally created life through our trash, through our pollution. One, can we get on that? Two, can you stop it? And when does it turn from a like environmental disaster into an explosion of life? And like it's protected under the Wildlife Service.
Exactly. Like, do you guys want a electric poison Pikachu variant? Because this is how you get an electric poison Pikachu variant.
Honestly, we've debated and talked about a lot, like what social services are around. Like even our earliest episode, we talked about the economics and the social services that have to be available for the Pokemon world to exist. And we've also talked about the various monopolies that exist in the Pokemon world and all that, how that would work out. And it's a very interesting society that we've thought way more about than the creator certainly would have. But it's it's important to think about it like from that standpoint, like, okay, they are definitely dumping something in there, but no one seems to be doing anything about it, or it was already stopped. Like all the Grimers and the Mucks and the Trubbishes have finished being made because they fixed the problem. But now, like, they're still out there. So at some point they were able, I think that there is some like government oversight. And again, each region has their own way of doing things, their own government, their own little system. But I think at some point they realized, okay, the garbage is alive. Let's get the council together and let's figure this out.
Okay. Oh, wouldn't that be the most fun headline to read in the newspaper? Just you wake up, you just like turn on the TV and they're just like, this just in, trash actually lives. It breathes, it thinks, it's a real thing now. So we're going to segue to like imported Pokemon. So like this is like Pokemon that literally could have been found by themselves if not for the fact that we literally picked them up and moved them. And this does actually have some real world examples, as I'm sure Lucas can be able to tell us about.
Oh, yes. So being from Florida, one of the things that people don't think about, it is I think it's number 1 or number 2 in the states with the most invasive plants and animal species. I think we're next to Michigan on that regard. With invasive species, a lot of people think of things like pythons and rats, and those are definitely the ones that Florida's most famous for. But also things like, when you go to the pet shop and you get an aquarium full of fish, and then all the fish die because it was your first time, you don't know any better. And so you try and get rid of it, like you flush the fish down and you just throw the plants into a lake. Like that's actually caused a whole bunch of problems. Like people have been treating the planet around us is like a dumping ground for our pets, and it's caused a lot of issues. Every time someone says, "Hey, it's so cold, the iguanas are falling off the trees in Miami," haha, I'm like, good. They're an invasive species. Catch them, eat them, turn them to jerky. They're delicious. But like,
Iguanas are an invasive species to Florida?
surprise, most people don't. They assume that they're here. No, iguanas are not from Florida.
That is really cool. And so with the actual Pokemon universe, we actually are getting back to Grimer and Muck in the Alolan versions of them, which were brought into the Alola region, which is just a tropical island region where they were just kind of tasked with just getting rid of the pollution, and it completely changed them.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of goo they were making. Like that's some special goo right there.
It's definitely interesting because this is something that like you had said has this real world precedent and is like being seen directly in the Pokemon world, and so due to efforts to clean up the environment, you just straight up have the like a Pokemon just naturally changes its entire form and its type.
Yeah, so like the Grimer and Muck are just like kind of variants of purple in their regular or mainland, I guess, regions. But then once they got to Alola, they started eating up the stuff there and just kind of have this Technicolor rainbow thing. And then the amount of chemicals that they've like have eaten have hardened. So it looks like they have like fangs or teeth. And then actually the Alolan Muck can eat more than just waste and can just kind of eat anything, which is terrifying. And like, it's just weird.
It's weird, but at the same time, like really useful from like urban planning standpoint of like, hey, this thing will eat our garbage. What does it produce? I don't know, these hard crystal looking things. Like no smell? No. No like chemical trace? Nah, it just hardens our trash into like these crystals that we can make into jewelries or knives or whatnot. It's like, huh. Get more goo. Give it more goo.
But just like an invasive species, like it has to get to this kind of weird equilibrium. And we're actually seeing that in some of the Pokedex entries that I saw in Ultra Sun and Moon. It mentions for Grimer, the wastewater coming from factories is clean these days. So Grimer have nothing to eat. They're said to be on the verge of extinction. And you have to think about that for a minute, because literally clean the earth, make sure that your environment is cleaner, less pollution is literally now an environmental risk of an invasive species. And like, where do you stand with that? There are some that like apparently some Pokemon conservationists have created things called sludge ponds where they kind of get to be in a preserve there, but like that's pretty much it.
Okay, so to go back to pythons, so pythons in Florida, huge invasive problem. Like they are killing a whole bunch of organisms. They kill tons of small mammals. What do you think their status is as like a species around the world? Do you think they're like a least concerned, a vulnerable? What do you think?
I don't know. I feel like people would want to know where they are because people are naturally afraid of snakes. So I would say like, not endangered, but just on the list somewhere.
They are just about endangered. As a species, in their
Really?
natural habitat, pythons are considered vulnerable or near threatened. And they're getting lower because in their native homeland, they are hunted for their meat and for their skin. So, in Florida, they're an invasive pest problem that need to be wiped out. In their homeland, they are a species that is currently being wiped out and needs to stop. It's one of those balances we are going to have to come to terms with in our own reality. Yes, this is a problem created by people, but at the same time, we could end up extinguishing a species off this planet, another one on our list. Where do we stand on that? Like if the Everglades becomes one of the only places to find these animals, clearly they're destroying everything else. But it's kind of like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few sort of deal. It's not an easy topic to talk about it. Even with Pokemon, it's like, yeah, this puddle of purple goo is like stinking up our cities. But like at the same time, if you walked by one on the street, withering and dying away in the hot sun, you're going to feel bad for it. You're human. You empathize. It's weird and cool.
That is weird.
It's sad.
It's very like, it puts you on a weird crossroads that I don't know, like if they had meant to, but they did just talk about this very weird thing where, it could be good to get rid of them, but I mean, is that even ethical?
It's the second saddest near extinction Pokedex entry in the game. It's not great.
Yeah.
It's the second saddest. Number one is Raichu's.
I thought Lapras.
No.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought Lapras was coming back.
No, Lapras has got Raichu's is the saddest. Raichu's are going extinct because people don't like them as much as Pikachu, so no one's evolving their Pikachus.
Are you serious?
Look up the decks. People are not
God.
because people don't. Oh, Pikachus are so great. What about Raichu? Ew, it's fat, long tail, gross, no cringe. It's like, oh, but it's a kangaroo rat. It's beautiful. Wow. People
I loved Raichu. I loved Raichu. I always loved Raichu more than Pikachu.
I mean, in Alola, they're fine because they surf and serve pancakes, but everywhere else, it's like, no, I'd rather keep this adorable little mascot on my shoulder. Raichu's too fat to sit up there. It's like, this is hurtful. But yeah, again, second saddest. Grimer to me at the second saddest because at least with Grimer, there's a reason why people don't want it around. With Raichu, it's just human opinion, and that bums me out.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, going off of that, we also have the example of a indirect human influence would be kind of the similar situation that led to Alolan, Rattata, and Raticate.
Yep. Those two.
Yeah, so this is super interesting. And I think definitely, Lucas, you either have heard of this or haven't, but this really follows the thread of an actual invasive species and bringing in its natural predator on a tropical island just like this. So they obviously, because rats, Rattata and Raticate, appear on the Alolan region just because they are usually just on ships and transport vehicles, and they just start eating everything on the island, and they're just an actual invasive species on the region. And then to curb the population, they bring in the Yungoos Pokemon family to the island, and they're hoping that it's their natural enemy and they are able to get rid of them, but instead it just creates this evolutionary arms race and creates a new form of Rattata and Raticate.
We actually talked about this in one of our earliest episodes, in episode 2, literally 4 years ago, a long time ago, because Alola had just come out, and that was our inspiration of this game is amazing. Look at these altered forms. It was we loved it. But honestly, the real story of how this happened, it's dumber than you think. So this did happen in Hawaii. The rats came, they brought in the mongoose, and the mongoose is literally one of the most terrifying invasive species to put on any island. So why do you think Rattata became a dark type? What do you think the reason is? Because it's a little bit funnier than you might think.
So I don't know. Caleb, you go first because I think I did the research too much.
I was going to say, is it a type advantage?
It's not as much.
Or is it a defensive
It's not type advantage. It's the fact that in the real world, what happened with these rats and the stupidity of the people who brought the mongooses, the rats were up at night. That's when they hunted. They were out at night. The mongoose was up during the day. It's a diurnal species, not a nocturnal species. So basically, they didn't even think about that. They just said, oh, let's just eat whatever rats would find. The rats were hiding during the day and out at night. The mongoose was sleeping during the night and hunting during the day. And so it just hunted more species. Just pure concentrated stupidity compounded on more stupidity. It's really why science is important. You have to know what you're introducing to any ecosystem. Is it complicated? Yes. Is it hard? Yes. All things in life are if they're worth doing. It's one of the dumbest stories of human ineptitude when it comes to dealing with the species. And I get where they came from. We need to fix our problem. Let's put in something else to try and fix the problem. And it's like, oh my God. Oh, so many animals went extinct because of that.
Yeah, in the Pokemon, at least in how this happened, was that they both were in during the day, but because of the kind of natural aggression that the Rattata and Yungoos species were, they the Rattata species became dark type and nocturnal, changed their appearance, and actually got bigger cheeks so they could hold more food instead of like being curtailed to stop eating food because they were being chased and hunted.
It is really funny in the game too. In the same patch of grass, if you go in the day, you find Yangoose. As you go at night, you find Alolan Rattata. So there's that little like, you can't get them both at the same time, idiots. I love it. I again, in the game, it's such a good thing. No one cares about just how much effort Pokemon put into Alola. Does it have the best story? No. Are the characters stiff as a board? Yes. But the Pokemon that they put into it make it all worth it. Those little details are just, chef's kiss. Mwah. Perfect.
And then you, did you have any other imported or like regional Pokemon that were influenced by humanity, you were saying?
Yeah, the other one that was imported, Meowth. Honestly, again, in Alola, it was fattened up and made into a jerk by the people's culture. And that just happens when you get rich. But it's cool that in Galar, like they actually had Vikings like coming and attacking the Galar region, which is similar to the Vikings that attacked the UK throughout the 700s, throughout the year 1000. Not my Viking history is a bit rusty, but they had
it's Saxons, Danes, and
that stuff. Thank
Nords.
You. So on the Viking ships in real life, they actually did have cats to take care of the rat problem. So in the game, they put a Meowth on their boat. The Meowth, not even because it was dropped off somewhere, just because during the travel, in order to deal with all the salt water hitting its fur got a lot tougher, a lot harder, and a lot sharper. And that's where you get the Alolan, the Galar Meowth, the steel type. And I love that idea. It's not even putting it somewhere. It's just stay on this boat for long enough and you will change. Which just means that what happens if I just leave a Pokemon anywhere? Does it change? Like, are they that susceptible to change in the environment? Because I just think that's hysterical. Like, all right, I am going to leave this Vanilluxe over here on this tropical island, and my ice cream is made of fire now. Huh. Weird.
Maybe that's how Magnemite became a steel type.
Maybe. I mean, just it takes. Yeah, who knows?
Possibly.
It might. Is it game design? Yes. Could it have some interesting lore? Probably not. But we're still going to theorize about it because that's what podcasts are for. Wink.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that definitely whatever is in the Pokemon DNA, it is highly adaptable. One thing that really kind of hit me about this was that it seems either that it's born into like actual evolution, or they just like after a while just metamorphise into whatever new region that is. And like, what was it? The Sinnoh region's Shellos and Gastrodon species being separated by Mount Cornet. I wonder, like they say it took like, thousands of years for them to be like split from one another and just like change to different forms. But judging from just these different Pokemon from human interaction, who's to say that those weren't like almost instantaneous as soon as they were just over a hill from one another?
Shellos were the same color when you left Winley.
Yeah, they just. I honestly would love to see like an actual timeline of humanity and all of that. Obviously Pokemon's not going to give it to us. It's a game meant directed towards children, but I think it's really interesting to think of like in our world, it takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years for there to be a truly significant change in an animal and to speciate. It takes dramatic mutation. It takes natural selection. It takes tons of variables and generations. In Pokemon, nah, son, put that cat on a boat. We'll get a steel type at some point. Yeah.
Like decades.
Yeah, decades.
Most.
Like, my father's father had a normal Meowth, and my father had a normal Meowth, and now I have a steel one. Looky here. Don't touch him. Yeah, look at that. Don't touch that cat. Don't touch that cat.
He bites. So, like, with the pollution Pokemon, we kind of seen that, like, we, through our own hubris, have created these Pokemon that kind of make a very difficult position for us to be in with wildlife and pollution. But with kind of moving different Pokemon and our activity, it kind of almost either is something that we either intentionally do but don't expect it to become a different version, or we do it to something else and it gets even worse. And I think it's just another example of us trying to control Pokemon in a much more kind of natural sense, and it's still being as messed up as creating a Pokemon through genetic mutation. It's just all the same. We cannot even fathom what the result will truly be. So that brings us to the strangest part of this, which is Pokemon that were not exactly created by humanity, but truly would not be here without literal human souls and whatnot.
I think though, while we're contemplating though on where we would be without human souls, we gotta go check out the window because I'm hearing funny noises. So we'll be back after this ad break. All right, no, we're back. It was
just the wind.
Yeah, sure. That's what the ghosts want you to think.
It was just the wind yelling Heathcliff over and over again.
Yeah, so ghost Pokemon are definitely one of the, I think, the most mysterious of origin Pokemon, because some, like, Ghastly, Gengar, Haunter, you can assume that they are Pokemon that just seem ghost-like or are the actual lost souls of Pokemon that have turned into new Pokemon in the afterlife. But either way, there are some with horrifying implications in their Pokedex entries.
Yeah, no, when it comes, especially with Ghastly, it's weird because on one hand, Ghastly can be the theory of miasma or bad air that people thought disease came from. And you could argue, oh, it's not truly a ghost. It's thousands upon millions upon billions of tiny little bacteria all floating in the air together to form and correlate this one singular being, kind of like a slime mold. Or it's an undead soul that's really ticked off and likes to mess with you. Choose one. Either or. We don't mind. Yeah, we can go with option B, but option A is just, that little bit of sci-fi. Ooh, so fascinating. But again, Gen 1 Pokemon, it ghost. Literally the name for Haunter in Japanese just literally means ghost. Like, we don't need to be complicated about this. He's ghost.
It's ghosty.
He's ghost.
So the first one that I have here is Yamask from the Unova region, and it is literally just this little black imp kind of Pokemon that floats and just carries a very humanoid face in a shape of a gold mask at the end of its tail. And the Pokedex entry says that that the Yamask was once human, and that the face is the face of that Yamask when it was alive in a past life.
Yikes. Yeah, yikes.
Let's break this down. If that is the case, I am terrified.
What's the matter?
Of dying in the Pokemon universe.
I mean, there's definitely, again, Yamask is based on the idea of the Egyptian pharaohs and their mummification. It turns into a literal living, breathing sarcophagus. But it is an interesting take on what happens when you die in the Pokemon world, because there's so many options. There's so many things that could happen to you. If you died a good death, you still risk being turned into a Pokemon too. It's weird. And again, like you said, it's kind of scary because you have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea if you're going to die horribly and like turn into some ghost that feeds off the spite and fear of children, or if you're just going to, slowly pass on and say hi to Arceus in the big place up sky.
Exactly, because then you even have like not just the ones that are individual, but then you also have the amalgams. You have like a Spiritomb, which is 108 different souls trapped inside.
Just an old keystone.
Sorry, I was playing Legends of Arceus. And this is the creepiest mission they give you in that game. Like, hi, here's this keystone. Collect souls. Like, excuse you? What did you say? Like, yeah, collect these souls
for a Pokemon
for me. And it's a small child handing you this keystone. Like, here, collect these dark, purple, burning souls for me. Won't you? It's like, sure. Nothing bad can happen. That is horrifying. I want to throw that kid in the river. I don't want to be near him.
The most fascinating thing about this is that the souls in question are not just regular human souls or innocent souls. It is literally implied that these are the 108 souls of sinful people who have done terrible things. And just, one of them could be Hitler. Who knows? Or Pokemon Hitler, whatever. And you never know.
At least one of them we know the sins of, because they sent me on a fetch quest that took me multiple fucking days.
See, now I'm not gonna put this together. I don't want Spiritomb anymore. It literally could just have a Nazi in there. You'll never know.
Let's see. The guy who worked at a call center for 40 years and liked it. The guy who invented white people dreads. Murderer. Elon Musk. Murderer.
From now on, every time I catch a Spiritomb, I'm just gonna give it the nickname 4chan or Reddit.
Oh no! Oh god! And still, of all the ghosts that I think humans create on accident, the worst and the most terrifying is Phantom. Phantom is the scariest. Do you know how Phantom is created?
Yes, a child gets lost in the woods, and literally, as they die, their soul just becomes a phantom.
Now, consider it this way from a conservationist standpoint. If the phantoms are needed for the ecosystem, if we need the phantoms for the ecosystem, remember what I said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Send those kids into the forest. We need more trees.
Do they have to, starve to death, or can we at least do a humane sacrifice thing?
Pick your poison. Literally. Aha. I'm not.
Come on, little Timmy, take your cyanide capsule and run into the woods.
Yeah, no, you have to give him the. It has to be like a sleeping pill of science. Like you just put the. It's why am I on a podcast talking about killing children? And I brought this up. Oh my god!
It's Pokemon, man.
It's mine. No, y'all didn't do this. I did this. What's wrong with me? But yeah, no.
No.
If you need to balance it out,
Pokemon did this.
Yes, we'll blame the Nintendo. We'll blame Nintendo. But it's
they did it. This is their game.
It really is an interesting idea with the ghost types. Again, back to our very beginning topic. If you're going to balance out these species and they are part of an ecosystem, putting them in is not so easy as putting an egg. Okay, with a Ditto, it kind of is. But if you're just trying to put them out there naturally with no Ditto, you could end up with villages and towns that are sacrificing people like the old days. You could end up with towns where things like vengeance and spite are banned. If someone finds you having these vengeful ideas or thoughts, or someone sees you talking about it, you could be kicked out of town because you could be drawing in these spirits. You could have towns where it's one of those dystopian utopias where it's everything's perfect. Nobody's sad here. Nobody's upset here. And the second someone's upset, you're going to bring in the ghost types. Get them out of here. There's so much that could be done with that. Oh, that would make a great story.
We got to throw them into the forest.
If Nintendo didn't have a copyright hammer the size of a planet, that would make a great story.
This went a lot of places. Final thoughts. I guess I'll go first. I think this kind of just shows the very deep connection humanity and Pokemon share. It's something that can create more Pokemon, near limitless potential, even through indirect actions and activities, as long as we congregate in a place or think that we know better than Arceus. There is always going to be new forms, new typings, and new Pokemon. For better or for worse, I think that some of the intention is very neutral and very human-centered. But once these are created, we have to look deep into ourselves to figure out, this is now our responsibility. How are we going to conduct ourselves? Because it's literally, I think this is more an example of us playing God than just creating Mewtwo, because it's not just that we created a Pokemon, we created a new Pokemon species.
And I think definitely kind of bridging off of that with my thoughts is that it is important to note that kind of as we've been talking here, making these kind of talking about the possible ethical dilemmas and the moral situations of what humanity did or didn't do with regard to some of these Pokemon, I think it's important to note that none of the above interactions have ever, at least in the games, framed the resulting Pokemon in an antagonistic light. So that's the thing. Even though Grimer and Trubbish literally come from trash and are the results of waste, they aren't portrayed as evil Pokemon. They aren't, like, what is it, the freaking, what was the name of the villain of Fern Gully?
Tim Curry. Tim Curry. We're just going to call him Tim Curry.
Yeah.
Tim Curry Smog.
All right, yeah. So, like, but then on top of that, like, they also often set aside the moral judgment of a lot of the human actions that lead to these, like, Pokemon or forms. Like, it also isn't necessarily, as much as they don't state ever really that Grimer or Muck are evil, they also don't state that creating waste is necessarily evil. Because, like, at the same time, if anything, it hints that it might be the opposite, because it's literally creating species. And, this is something that we've been discussing, like, the different implications of that but I think kind of this subtle theme of these often unintentional relationships becomes a really interesting parallel, especially with how a lot of the more recent games, like Arceus and New Pokemon Snap, have really been exploring the relationship of the Pokemon and human worlds in the sense of what either may look like without the other, as well as you have a lot of the like earlier Pokemon games that talk about the intentional relationship between humans and Pokemon, how a Pokemon might directly influence us or how we might directly create a Pokemon. But having these either unintentional interactions or these interactions that maybe were initially intentional but just went in such unexpected directions, it just becomes like this really interesting commentary on humanity's relationship with nature, I guess.
For me, all this talk just connects to how difficult it is to do in reality. Like, the games and stuff are always fun to talk about, but all this fun and ethical questioning we've had, a lot of these ethical questions are brought up today with real world. We have the technology today to wipe out almost any species we want with the snap of a finger. We have the genetic ability, the chemical ability, the physical ability to just wipe out a species if we truly want to.
Including us.
Should we? Including ourselves. Not that hard. But should we? And when should we? And how should we? And how many should we? That's something that we are dealing with in the real world. And Pokemon gives us a chance to kind of see how difficult that question would be. Like, a lot of people like to assume that, oh, it's easy, just get rid of A or remove B, and they don't see the other domino that get knocked over when you do. I love these conversations because, like, Pokemon is a medium, and it is the most popular and economically viable media we have for, look, it's the top selling merchandising on the planet of any company. Like, it is what it is. But it's important for me to see so many people, like, looking at it and they're like, that's kind of weird. What if it was like this in our world? And then they'd be like, oh, snap, it actually is like this in our world. Like you said at the very beginning, you didn't know that iguanas were invasive because they've been so integrated into a lot of people's lives in this area. Well, the same could be said of the Grimers or the Mucks. They've become so integrated into life in these cities, people don't want them to go. It might be bad for the ecosystem, but that human empathy, that human ability to connect with anything from a dog or a cat or a living trash bag is enough to keep them around. We have to argue with that fact of, okay, if we're going to keep them around, is it going to be the best for everyone? And everyone's going to disagree. Everyone's going to make the sludge pool or try and fill the sludge pool with bleach to get rid of them. It's really, really interesting to think about all these issues and to think this all comes from a game that was invented by a man who liked to catch bugs in his childhood. It all led to this. And I think that's just so much fun to talk about with the Pokemon world.
And I think that definitely. And so kind of with that, if, again, for any of our listeners who are, really into the Pokemon stories, which I would assume they were, because if they want to hear more about these stories and these science things, now that they're actually at the end of this episode, where can they find you guys?
So we are on every major podcasting network. Just look up PokeScience. You'll find us. If you guys want to talk to us on Twitter, we are at Pokemon Science. We're on Facebook under Poke Science. We are always listening. We always want to hear from you guys. We like it when you guys leave us a review. I like it when you guys leave suggestions because we've gotten some of our best episodes from people like going on Apple and like, hey, do an episode on normal types. And we're like, you know what? We're going to do that. And we actually did. It was a lot of fun. I love getting a chance to hear what you guys think when you guys share us weird stuff or you tell us what you enjoy about us. We love talking about this stuff. And one of our favorite sayings is that we are smarter together. We learn more when we work together. We learn more when we talk and communicate with each other, when we all reach out. Again, it's weird that it took like a Japanese game about animal pit fighting to bring this about. But like, it is what it is. And we love doing what we do. I love coming and talking with you guys. Bruce, Caleb, you've been phenomenal for letting me come on. I've had a lot of fun, especially with talking about the dark stuff. Because that's just fun to hear people's reaction. Your reaction to the Phantom was priceless. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that all day. How are they going to react? Oh, no! Like, yes! That's what I'm here for.
Yep. Nightmares. That's
what I'm here for.
Shiny hunting Phantom is never going to be the same again.
Yeah, Shiny
do you send
Phantom,
like an albino kid into the forest?
Yeah. No, he was just a ginger. He was literally just a ginger. Like, I know, the ginger kid was sent into the woods. This is what happened to him. Like, oh, God.
And with that, you have sent us all. And with that, you have sent us all into the Keystone to become part of the Spirit Tomb.
No, I don't want to be the guy who chews with his mouth open. No, I don't want to be next to that soul. Please.
Lucas, thank you again for just being able to join us on this podcast. It has been a pleasure for your insight and your expertise.
With all of that about wraps it up. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, because that really helps us grow the show. Be sure to connect with us on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter at lore_party. So thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.